Executive Director of Prisoners Legal Services of New York. I would like to welcome you all tonight and thank you so much for coming. This is PLS's third annual Pro Bono celebration. For those of you who have attended our prior Pro Bono celebrations, you can look around and see how much we have grown. Not us, but the event. We started out 3 years ago by showing a film that I think some of you were at the Spectrum, entitled Crime After Crime. And it was a film about a woman who went to prison in California for the murder of her husband, but it was all a result of domestic violence. And the film followed two pro bono attorneys who worked for over 10 years to secure Debbie's freedom. And about 40 people showed up to that event. Last year, we hosted an event at the Fort Orange Club that focused on solitary confinement. We asked prisoners to submit stories and poems about solitary confinement, and we received 60 submissions, picked 12, and we had local actors perform those submissions, and we had about 50 people attend that event. As you can see, this year the attendance for this event has more than tripled. Again, I cannot thank you enough for coming out. Our focus tonight is on what we are calling Bookends, a look at how prison affects those who are young and those who are old. Specifically, we asked prisoners to write stories or poems about incarceration and how it has affected either their relationship with their children or what it's been like to grow old in prison. We received over 170 submissions. Tonight, you'll hear from 12 of those individuals, and you will have the unique opportunity of hearing what is in the hearts and minds of those we hold behind bars. But before we get to the performance, I would like to say just a few words about the purpose of tonight's performance. As you can see from the price of the tickets, this event was not so much a fundraiser, but to raise consciousness, which will hopefully translate to involvement through pro bono volunteering or donations. So let me do my part about raising consciousness. There are 55,000 individuals in our New York State prisons. They range from age 16 to people well in their 90s. They are being held in 58 prisons across the state. They are there because they violated the laws of the state, and they are repaying their debt to society. But 96% of them will come home to our communities. Thousands are released every year. With that knowledge, we need to recognize that it is our responsibility to push for humane treatment and rehabilitation in prisons so that our incarcerated New Yorkers can successfully reintegrate into our communities. If the 1971 Attica Uprising taught us anything, it taught us that treating incarcerated New Yorkers with justice and humanity is not only a human rights issue, it is a public safety issue. PLS was created as a result of and in response to Attica. And we work every day to do all that we can to ensure that prisoners are provided with adequate medical and mental health care, appropriate programming and education, that they are able to communicate and visit with their families, and that they are not subject to brutality or left to decompensate in solitary confinement. But our funding is limited, and we simply cannot do all the work that needs to be done. We have 15 attorneys. We receive 10,000 requests for assistance annually. That's why we need your help. We need your time, your energy, your passion, and for those of you who can afford it, your money. In many of the poems and stories tonight, you will hear voices of depression, fear, anger, and hopelessness. You will also hear the voices of relentless spirits of hope. Hope spurred on by knowing that there are people out there like you who are willing to take a chance on someone else, who are willing to give of themselves and who believe in a system of justice. Please listen to those voices.
I have been incarcerated for over 7 years now, after having served a previous incarceration of 11 years. I have sustained many challenges as a father to 4 children throughout my incarcerations. The greatest challenge, and the one thing which I struggled the most while being incarcerated, was having to explain to my children why I am here. For example, when I had to explain to my 3 children about my first incarceration, I found it extremely difficult to see the looks on their face and to try and cope with the fact that they were so young and would have to live their lives without my presence. I recall my eldest son asking me,
"Dad, why are you so evil?"
At that moment, I didn't have an answer for him. But I recall being both confused and rattled with anger by his question, which led me to question myself as to why I was incarcerated, and as to why I did the things I did that led to my incarceration. From that moment on, I began to realize the pain and suffering which I'd inflicted upon myself and upon my children, which led me to reanalyze my situation. And in doing so, I felt the full impact and harsh reality of the many challenges I would have to face as an incarcerated parent. Now that my youngest child is 11 years old, I find myself faced with similar challenges that I faced years ago with my older children. For starters, she's a girl, and is now asking more or less the same questions as to why I am here. But this time around, I am a lot more patient and wiser when answering her questions, which allows me to give her a broader perspective as to why I am here. I guess the second time around is a lot easier, being that I've already been through this before with my older children. Though my incarceration has affected my children in a tremendous way, and is by far the most difficult thing I've had to challenge with in my life, I am still a very fortunate man, and am always reminded how blessed I am, simply because my children still acknowledge my existence, despite the situation, and have constantly told me that,
"Dad, no matter what, we will always love you."
I was born and raised in Albany.
Dad, no matter what, we will always love you.
Parents that abandoned me at the tender age of 2 weeks old. I was fortunate enough to have a maternal grandmother that was willing and caring enough to take in the responsibility of me and my older brother. My father's mother was gunned down and killed the same year my mother was pregnant with me, so we were fortunate not to end up in the system. Life was hard with my grandma, but at least we had somebody that sincerely loved us. I grew up in an overcrowded apartment. My grandmother struggling to feed and clothe us, while fending off her crack-addicted son and daughter who would often steal what money or food stamps she had to feed us for that month. I can remember stumbling upon her sobs. I would open her door and I'd see her crying, and I would immediately start crying because no child can stand to see his mother cry. I would ask her, "Ma, why are you crying?" And she would say that my uncle or my aunt had stolen money and she didn't know how she was going to feed us that month. And as a young boy, that hurt my soul. ripped me apart, and the memories to this day still have an effect on me. I began to believe that I was a weight on my grandma, and I could see she was hurting every day. Every time the cupboards began to go bare, every time we had to go to school in shoes or clothes that had holes on them. And I wanted to help. I didn't want to hurt her because I loved her with everything in me. So I started to run away, age 10, 11, staying on friends' back porches, in the basements, whatever I had to do, robbing, stealing to eat, and eventually selling drugs. See, the way I saw it, I was taking care of myself, and I was able to contribute once in a while, and I thought I was helping. But I hurt her with worry. And I would come home after days, sometimes weeks, and I would offer her my money or my food stamps from my dealings, which she more than not refused. So I spent the next couple of years, bouncing between juvenile facilities until eventually the Department of Corrections. I have 4 beautiful daughters and a son. They're my everything. My life, my whole reason for living, and it's been a difficult thing to do. Be a father and love and want to protect your babies from all those potential harms in the world, and while incarcerated. I was blessed to have my children by my side throughout my incarceration. I was blessed to have a strong, beautiful woman stand by me for so many years. She was the mother to 2 of my children. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She was murdered in a dispute with her upstairs neighbor in the presence of my 9-year-old son and my youngest daughter, who was 5 years old at the time. This was the worst experience of my life. Knowing that my babies were hurting, and I really couldn't do anything about it. So I started to really just look at things for what they were. And despite the fact that me and my children's mother we were making do, but I was hurting my babies. Every decision I made affected my babies. And they were forced to make do with what they had and what they did not have. Me.
I'm the father of a 2-year-old boy who lives with his mother in Colorado. You know, it wasn't until he was about a year old that I actually came to find out that I was his father. You know, me and his mother were no longer together, and she had already begun an engagement with another man before Jack was even born. Well, upon finding out, I went to visit him, and my breath was just blown away by the fact that this little guy was my own flesh and blood, you know? So I went to the court to get a paternity test, and I began the process of re-enlisting in the National Guard. I even went back to college, you know, just to be able to provide support to his mother. Oh, and also to be a positive role model as his biological father. Yeah. I even began the process of entering court to ensure that I was given joint custody and equal visitation rights. I want to be there for my son, 100%. I don't ever want him to know the pain of not knowing his biological father. I don't ever want him to have to ask himself, why was I not good enough for him to keep me in his life? I don't want him to be missing a major part of himself that can only be filled by knowing the man that brought you into this world. The man who gave you those baby blue eyes and that crooked smile. His mother is refusing to allow any form of communication now that I'm in prison. I can't really say that I blame her either. But I will fight to be the father that I promised my son that I was going to be. I wrote him this poem. Go easy on me. It's really only a rough draft. It's called The Father's Lullaby. I was blessed with an angel born, and you have shown me how deep love can be. But where there are tears, there will be smiles too. Because when we cry, love will carry us through. So lay your head and don't be scared. Because when you wake, I will be right here. I'll dry those tears and the shadows, they'll flee. Because no monster is ever going to be able to get by me. And in these arms you will safely stay until you feel ready to find your way. Just always know that no matter where you go, you will have this place to call a home. So lay your head and don't be scared. Because when you wake, I will be right here. I'll dry those tears and the shadows, they'll flee. Because hey, little man, no monster's ever gonna get by me.
This is my fourth incarceration. I have previous sentences for attempted robbery in the third degree, attempted robbery in the first degree, and attempted criminal sale of a controlled substance in the third degree. My first child was a boy, born while I was incarcerated. I was 21 years old and didn't fully comprehend the values of parenthood. I married his mom because I thought it would keep us together as a family unit, but it ended in divorce when she got pregnant by another guy. My second child was born when I was free. I grew up without a father and a mother who only partially cared, so among all the crimes that I've ever committed, the greatest and the worst was being an incarcerated father. There was no pain more memorable than when my son, who was in his early teens, he called me a bitch. I tried explaining to him about being in jail for so many years, but the pain in his eyes told me a different story. And then I realized this really was my son because I had done the same horrible thing to my father over a prison phone when he was incarcerated in Southport. I rejected my father, and my son rejected me.
When I was arrested, my son was just 14 months old. He is now 19 years old. And due to my being in prison his entire life, we basically have no relationship. Because of my one mistake, I was unable to teach my son how to throw a football, how to ride a bike, how to read and write. I was unable to teach my son how to be a man. Due to my being incarcerated, my son was forced to just wonder what it would be like to have his father around. I wish there was something I could do to change things, but there is nothing that I can do. That time I've already lost with my son has been lost forever. Not to mention, I'm still left to suffer the pain of knowing that I won't be able to enjoy time with my son. There are still many more nights where I am forced to be away from my son. Many more nights where I have to cry myself to sleep. Many more nights where I can't even tell my son that I love him. If I had the opportunity to go back and do it all over again, believe me when I say that I would do things a whole lot differently.
I am a 24-year-old woman behind bars. Used to sell my body, jumping in and out of cars. Used to steal, set people up to get robbed. Stopped school at 15. Never worked a job. I got 8 sisters and 4 brothers. Sex offender for a father, drug abuser for a mother. Sold drugs because the streets is where I had to be. Now I'm incarcerated. I guess that's something better for me. I don't have any kids, now no family. I used to have friends, now we're enemies. Caught up with a man 9 years older supplying me with drugs. I'm locked up, it's over. He has a wife and a baby just born. So I couldn't live with myself if he was locked up and gone. I took this time to gain his love. But his love was the money I received from drugs. I can't understand my purpose on this earth. I've been raped, abused, and used since birth. Father playing in my panties at 8 years old. Mother in the streets chasing drugs in the cold. Family split up, foster homes to the streets. Sleeping with men for money to eat. Manipulating men who want you weak. Controlling men who that the way you speak, you get beat. Why am I here? Because the streets made me be. It doesn't matter. No one even remembers me.
I was in solitary confinement when Alyssa was born. The first time I saw her, I'd been through a set of photographs. I sat on the cool cement floor, and I shuffled through a set of pictures until I dog-eared all the corners. My baby was naked, and screaming, and fragile looking, and perfect. She was as perfect as fresh snow on Christmas Day. Until then, I never believed in love at first sight, at least not in the conventional sense. But with her, it was different. I loved her instantly. My instincts were to protect her and teach her and keep her away from jerks like me. How could I have created something so wondrous and pure? She was everything I wasn't. She was a miracle. My relationship with her mother deteriorated almost immediately. I destroyed it basically by being myself. I mean, the way I saw it, I expected her to sew up her lady parts and become a nun. It seemed only right that she put her life on hold and become celibate. Much to my astonishment, she disagreed. The frequency with which I saw Alyssa was predicated upon by the moods of her mother. But when I did see her, it was like I'd been there all along. Alyssa had this way of making time stand still. She was adorable and she was wicked smart. At age 3, she was learning Spanish and Japanese. At age 4, she was criticizing my smoking and lecturing me on the virtues of SpongeBob SquarePants. And she loved me. Me, an absent jailbird of a dad. In 2008, Alyssa's mother up and decided that they were moving. Where, I'd asked. Nevada. Simply put, I lost my mind. I took legal action. Futile, ineffective legal action. And when that failed, I kicked and screamed. I hollered. I even begged and pleaded. I shook my fist at the sky, but it was useless. Alyssa moved. In 2010, Alyssa's mom and her boyfriend went to jail. Drugs. Drugs around the kids. Some robot of a social worker placed Alyssa into foster care in the care of some woman of dubious character. Being incarcerated, I've learned to develop making a worst case scenario into an art form. I pictured Alyssa huddled in some bullet-riddled crack house while children scurry from sewer to sewer and feral dogs eat the remains of homeless people. Time passed. I watched Alyssa grow up in the visiting rooms of various prisons. Every time she was taller and smarter and more aware of the burden that my incarceration had placed on her. But did she really know? Did she really know the limited childhood to which my decisions had confined her? I mean, sure, she saw other kids with their daddies, but did she really feel the loss? Sometimes she would stare at the table in between us for what felt like an eternity. And she would look at me and say, "Daddy, when are you getting out of this place?" I'd calmly cite my release date, and that would prompt her to roll her eyes and look at the ceiling as if she were calculating how much longer she'd have to hold her breath. So time passed. And I realized that the best I can hope to be to her is friend. Because I messed up any chance I've had of being a father. Some days, it's a seamless mosaic of Eskimo kisses and her musical laughter. And other days, it's snapshot memories, like the remnants of an epic hangover. And I know that one day, she will outgrow the cutesy-wootsy naivety that keeps her warm restraint below the surface. And she'll hate me for the lie that I am. But until that day comes, I will press my ear to the phone and I'll let an angel tell me that I am the bestest daddy in the whole wide world. Because that's all I have left. It's all that makes me feel like a man.
I had a dream last night. I had a tale to tell. I dreamed I saw an angel. Poor thing. He wasn't feeling well. His body was all ripped and torn. This angel could hardly walk. He looked so tired and worn. I went to him to ask, "Angel, how can this be?" He turned around, paused a bit, and then spoke these words to me. "I am your guardian angel. A great task, as you can see. You've run amok for most your life, and look what it's done to me. These bruises are from shielding you in time both dire and ill, those drinking bouts, those drugs you've used, I've often paid the bill. You see my wings, all ripped and torn? How often they have shielded you from evil unaware. If only you had learned to stand on your own. But don't fret or worry. Try to remember. I'm getting old and frail. Could not believe all that I'd heard, let alone how much I cared. So I wept upon his shoulder and then left him in despair. The next day, I sat and pondered. Should I even try? And in the distance, I thought I heard a frail old angel's cry.
I am a father of 4, all by the same mother. I've taken care of my children since their birth. Not being there for my children has destroyed my relationship with them. My youngest, now 6 years old, doesn't seem to know me anymore. He doesn't want to speak with me when I call. My oldest and second oldest, 15 and 14, are now using marijuana and have adjusted to being in the streets since I've been gone. I know it would have been different if I had been there to play my role as a father. I believe, had I been there, I could have shown them how to be honest young men. But instead, they went to the streets to seek adventure. My oldest children repeatedly made honor and merit roll. That is, until I got incarcerated. It seems their lives are dramatically changing for the worse. One, or both of them, are now stealing money from their mom, cursing, using drugs. None of this would be happening if I was there to guide them. But it's impossible to have an effective long-distance relationship. Out of sight, out of mind is a quote I use. It's not possible to display any discipline from my position. Since my 2 oldest boys outgrew their mom, they feel they can overrule her. It hurts me so badly to know I made the wrong decisions that resulted in me going to prison and now has affected my children. I pray to God that I get out in time to change the path they are pursuing.
I'm a convicted felon, serving an 18 years to life sentence for a crime which I did commit and I deeply regret. I'm also a cancer survivor and a human being. In May of 2008, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3B advanced. Prior to being admitted to the hospital, I was very sick and I knew something was very wrong with me. I was sent to the prison hospital. The place was filthy, food inadequate. I wasn't given the medications that I was supposed to get. The place was also complete boredom. There was no air circulation. This was during a heat wave. You don't even get a change in underwear. Not allowed any personal property. The trips to the outside hospital were abominable. Full restraints, handcuffs, black box, waist chain, leg shackles. These were only partly removed during the treatment. Each of these trips took 10 to 12 hours, even though the treatment was only 4 hours and the facility was only 20 minutes away. The lunch was poor, to say the least. And most times, I didn't make it back to the facility in time for dinner. The worst part of these trips was going in and out of the hospital. They try to limit contact between the inmates and the civilians, but there's still times when this cannot be avoided, and that's the worst part. Most people, they just look away, pretend that you're not there. Other people just look at you with pure disgust. Some others just look at you with pity. Almost never does anyone just look and see one person looking at another. You become an object rather than a human being. One of these trips stands out in my mind. Most of the time, I would get into one of the side rooms at the hospital. This day, all the side rooms were taken, so I was placed in the floor area. I was led by a nurse to a nice, comfortable chair. They set up a curtain in between the chairs, separation to a certain degree. There was two ladies on the other side of this curtain. They also give you a little TV set. So I turn on the TV and I'm flipping through the channels. That's when one of these ladies says, "Officer, could you tell him to turn that down?" This is even though their TV was blasting. So the officer signals for me to turn it down. I just turn it off. So then the ladies, they start talking, and in that setting, can't help but overhear. They're saying things like, "He shouldn't be near us. He shouldn't even be receiving treatment. It's a waste of tax dollars," etc., etc. I just shook my head and felt sorry for them. So I'm stuck there a couple more hours waiting for my IV drip to finish and hoping that I make it back to the facility in time for dinner. After all that's waiting for me in the holding area is 4 slices of cheese, 4 slices of stale bread, a half-rotten apple, and 8 ounces of juice, which is just about turned into wine. There's an old lady sitting next to me. She grabs a hold of her old lady bag, you know, the kind that's almost as big as she is and holds just about everything under the sun in it. And she pulls out a peach. And she asks me if I would like one. I say, "No, thank you, madam. After all, I am not supposed to have contact with the outside populations." After my treatment was done, the officers are putting back on the few restraints that were removed. That's when these two ladies start with their comments again. The little old lady, she looks at me and she tells me to have a nice day with a smile. I tell her to take care of herself. She says that she will be peachy keen. To myself, I say, "Thank you for treating me as a human being." In August of 2013, I have been listed as being cured of the cancer. In October of 2012, I was given 2 more years by the parole board. But, all in all, life is peachy keen.
As a kid, I played sports. And I enjoyed all the freedoms that children have. But as a teenager, I began to look at the street life and all the pretenses in it. I began to sell drugs to purchase the material things that I saw as status. I went all the way through high school. They even offered me academic and sports scholarship, but you know what? I turned them down. I needed me a break. In 2000, I was incarcerated. And in 2002, my first child was born. I thought it would be a good idea to be a parent, especially since I had a life sentence. First time I got a look at my little girl's face, it reminded me of the innocence of being a child. But as the years went by, the struggles began to mount. Not being able to support my wife and daughter financially was at the root of my stress. After seeing my daughter for a few hours and then she had to leave, it always tore me out. Now, I was conflicted also as whether or not I should tell her about my situation. But I realized that unlike other people in my position, I wasn't going to lie to my daughter. What was I going to tell her? I was going to be home soon, or I was going to be away at school? No. When she got older, I told her what prison was, and I told her why I was in prison, and it hurt me to my heart. You know, being moved from prison to prison, it don't do nothing much but trying to help you build a family relationship. But I'm fortunate, because I got a wife that supports the special bond I got with my daughter. You know, I make sure that she's always in my life. I write her letters. I even draw her pictures. Look. That's my baby. I always make sure that she's important. We don't have a normal father-daughter relationship, but I believe that our bond is stronger than average. I let her know that I may not be there when she wants me to be there, but she's always in my heart. Being a parent and being incarcerated is a hurdle. Yet it is one that must be overcome. And I don't let it get in the way of me being a parent or stop me from my responsibilities as a father. Being incarcerated is a thing that you have to deal with. But being a parent is not where you are, but who you are. "26 years to life. I've been called, classified, and accused of being many things over these past years. I've been called detainee, inmate, murderer, felon, offender, and then some. And I have been treated as such. To many people, including those that I ask for help from, I'm known as inmate 05E5553. I've also been called brother, son, cousin, lover, uncle, nephew, and my personal favorite, daddy. You never really know the value of a person until they're dead. And being incarcerated exposes this truth to its fullest. I feel like a spirit, dead to the world, and these penitentiaries are the graveyards in which my soul and spirit haunts. Visitors seem to be mourning my death, praying and waiting for my resurrection. Since my death, I hear the prayers of my loved ones, their pain and their anger. I hear my children expressing their displeasure with their mother, envying their peers who have both parents, and expressing their anger towards me for not being there. I hear my queen express the fact that the family has grown distant since my death. But they all have one theme in common. They all believe it would have been better had I not died.
Dear baby girl, sorry I wasn't strong enough to be a man. I sat and I thought of you and wondered if you had been born for 6 years while in prison. Then I ran into your mother. The look in her eyes told me, and I came to see you. Although I felt sort of trapped, not because I didn't want to or love you, but simply because I didn't know how to. At that time, I had just finished a 6-year prison sentence and returning back to society with nothing at 25. I didn't want to be a father that was just there and not able to do anything for his child or her mother financially. So I thought it would be best to get some money and then appear when I was able to provide for my family on a whole basis. Baby, a man is raised to believe that he has to provide for his family. And when he can't, it has a mental, physical, and emotional impact on that man. And not all are strong enough to hold still while the boat is rocking. Before I go on, know this. I will always love and respect your mother. The problem was never with her, it was with me. She knew me before the streets took all the good out of me. Baby, in 2001, after losing a job at McDonald's for lying on the application about my felony, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was already confronted with emotional and financial strains of being a young black man straight out of prison. Immediately out, I had put in applications everywhere and never got any responses. McDonald's was the only one that responded. And after working for 45 cents a day in prison, I said, why not? But I had to figure out how I was going to provide my clothing, shoes, and pocket money. Regardless of what people say about money not being everything, if you don't have any, you're as good as nothing. I wouldn't have been able to support my habits, like going to the movies and going out on dates. No woman want to go out on a date with a guy who isn't dressed appropriately or able to provide his own way. And all this was just way too much. So I decided to get some money with these guys I knew who respected me. I never liked drugs because of my mother's addiction to it my whole life. Anyway, things went wrong. I was only out 60 days before I let a friend talk me into doing a robbery for a whole bunch of money that would have taken me out of the streets for good. Unfortunately, an off-duty cop was there, and shit just got crazy. I got 13 years on this case. The whole time in prison, I've been trying to find you. I had no one to help me on the streets other than my sister, and I didn't want to ask her for help because I knew she would make me handle my responsibilities, and I didn't want that. I just wasn't man enough. And then, when I wanted to tell her about you, I was ashamed. But now, my sister's been helping me trying to find you and your mother since she knew about you. She found out y'all moved to Tennessee, or somewhere down south. Baby, ain't none of what I mentioned a justification for me not being a father to my child. But I do know that most of my life, I didn't even believe my own mother loved me. I didn't love myself. Therefore, I didn't know how to love you. I missed all your birthdays, graduations, and sweet 16s. When is your birthday? Do you have a smart mouth like me? I hate myself more than you can ever hate me. But I will fight until the day I die to find you. Just so that I can tell you that I love you with all of my heart. Tears are in my eyes right now because I pray that you can forgive me. love always and forever, Daddy.
When I was home, it was all about my daughter. She always asked questions about everything. I was so happy with her. Everybody said she was the mini-me. She was taken away because I had stopped going to see my psychiatrist, and I had tried to commit suicide in the past when I was on medication. I feel good, so I stopped taking medication. My doctor reported, and they took my daughter. Then I went to court. They say if I comply, they will let me see her and be with her. That went well. But then I got sick. I start to get seizures real bad. I would get them back to back. Almost every week I was at the hospital. Since I didn't have family, I let a lady from church take care of her. She had adopted a child, so I thought it would be good for my daughter, so she had someone to play with. Myra let me talk to my daughter every day and see her whenever I wanted. When I got arrested in 2010, she would bring me my daughter every 2 weeks for 7 months. But when I got remanded to do 2 years for this case, she changed on me. She said that was too much time for me to be away in prison. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of her. She's always in my thoughts. I'm always thinking of the good times we had. How she's so funny. She's the only thing that keeps me alive. This time in prison, it's killing me. I want to be with her. I miss her more and more and more every day. I have a picture of her, and I look at it every day, all day. I never thought I was so hard. I regret everything I did to be here in the first place. I will never do anything that's not legal. I'm so stressed out because I would do anything to be with my daughter. Now and forever.
Letter from my baby girl.
Dear Daddy, how's everything? I know you're probably surprised to hear from me, Hopefully, once you read these thoughts, you'll understand why I have been missing in action. This is going to be a lengthy letter, so I'm going to skip the small talk. Daddy, what I want to express has been a long time coming, 20 years to be exact. In fact, I want you to know that I've attempted to write this on numerous occasions. You should see how many times I've started it. I know at the completion of this letter, I'll grapple with whether I should send it to you or not, as I have a million times before. If you do receive this, I want you to know it's not my intention to offend or hurt you, because I love you with all that I am. Initially, I was simply going to write it and give it to you when you come home, but with the randomness of the parole board, there's no guarantee that you'll be released, even when your 20 years are up. So in a way, that's what makes this letter more significant. Plus, today I received my acceptance letter from the university that I applied. Yes, your baby girl is off to college. I can see that big smile on your face. I'm so happy, Daddy. But as always, there's a part of me that's sad. Here I am embarking on another chapter of my life, and the one person I yearn to share my happiness with is not here. Have you ever been happy and sad at the same time? Daddy, it's the most confusing thing. Okay, here I go. The first time I sat down to write this letter was 8 years ago when I was 13. At that age, not only did I feel unsure about myself when it came to putting exactly what I felt on paper, but I was scared because of what your reaction would be towards me. Back then, all I can remember is hearing so many stories about you. How you were this good dude, someone who got busy when it came to handling your business. However, it wasn't long before I figured out the term good in your case meant bad, a complex thing for a child to wrap her mind around. But since these stories about you were told to me by people I trusted, I felt the need to listen. Crazy, right? Daddy, when I was younger, I used to love hearing people talk about you. The stories made my heart swell with pride. However, somewhere around 13, things changed. I no longer wanted to hear them. I know they didn't mean any harm, but I wish those people understood that stories about your reputation did very little for the emptiness in my heart and the void in my life. I recall how I used to sit around and act like I enjoyed hearing about your notoriety. I believe I did that because I was young and felt that it was my job to at least appear as if I was interested in your tragedy. But if truth be told, stories about you made me sick. Not because these were stories of bad things. Everybody seemed to paint you as a stand-up individual. But they made me sick because they took me to that empty place inside of me. That place of sadness. A place you built by subtraction, by leaving me. Do you know by not having you here to encourage me, to give me unconditional support, those years have drained me of the confidence I needed to approach life fearlessly. As a result, Daddy, every step I took was shaky. But somehow I made it. And now I'm on my way to completing my dream of being a teacher. I guess I can say I managed to defy the odds. Crazy, right? Daddy, can I ask you something? How could you put these streets before Lexi and me? Weren't we more important to you than what others thought about your reputation? What were you thinking? Were you thinking? Do you know that a daughter without a father is like a life without a pulse? I never cared about you being a stand-up guy. What I needed was to see you stand up and applaud louder than any other person in the auditorium when I got through my first dance recital. For you to stand up and greet the first boy who dared to ask me out. For you to stand up and shout words of encouragement when I forgot my lines during my first play. But no. You chose to stand up to some guys that, like you, had no idea what was or is truly important in life. I know, I sound like a mad black daughter, but I don't mean to come off like that. It just hurts when I think about how much time has elapsed and how empty my life has been without you. Daddy, do you feel sad when you think about your childhood? I think everybody feels a little sad when they think about their childhood. I believe it's because the world we knew then seems so far away. That's not the case for me. That world still exists and will continue to exist until you're released. I think that's why I don't visit you as much. Daddy, I'm tired of sitting in that visiting room, eating those nasty chicken wings that have been sitting in those vending machines for God knows how long. Those dirty cream-colored walls reek with damp and overpowering indifference, as if the paint has absorbed the sadness of the place. Daddy, do you know what I want? I want to know what it feels like to love you without constraints, without the watchful eyes of the prison guards, without them talking and telling you to tuck in your shirt or where to sit. I notice how those things irritate you. But that's why I hate that place. It's abnormal. I know hate is a strong word, but I really hate what it does to you, Lexi, and me. Yet then again, your actions led you there. Daddy, can you imagine what it feels like having a father who missed your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, sweet 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th birthdays? Whew. Even writing it out seems like such a long time. Maybe reading it, you can get an idea of how long it's been for me. When I think about it, I just shake my head. But that's my whole point. There was no you. Let me apologize for not sending you a Father's Day card. I know that's something that upsets you, and you probably think I'm selfish for not acknowledging you, but let me try to explain. As far as Lexi and I are concerned, Father's Day is never a big deal. We hardly know when it falls, and rarely celebrate it when it occurs. To us, Father's Day is kind of like St. Patrick's Day. It seems like a celebration for other people, a day that belongs to another culture. You may not understand this, but I become extremely depressed in June, so it's easier to just forget it. It's crazy, even as I write these words, I realize my hurt is still alive. I thought I was healing, but that's not the case. The bottom line, Daddy, is that my life has been chaotic, and I find myself often wondering what I could compare my feelings to. This way you could get an idea of the hurt I feel, yes. I want you to feel my hurt. You deserve to feel my pain. Wasn't my smile enough? Wasn't my smile bright enough to light up your world? Wasn't I enough for you to want to get to know me better? Didn't you want to get to see my first step, grow my first tooth, say my first word, take and pick me up from school? Didn't you want to take me on my first date so I would know what to expect when I did go out with a guy? Didn't you want to teach me how to drive? To stop me from getting my first tattoo? I needed you to want that. Daddy, I constantly wonder what I could have become more to you. At the center of what I am, I feel the burden of your neglect, and it's growing like a tumor, malignant and swelling. That's why I'm crying out to you. As I write, my face covered in tears. but they feel good for a change. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I just needed to share these thoughts with you so that I don't come undone. Daddy, there is so much hurt inside me. It's so heavy and taking up space where my heart should be free and beating. Please tell me how a father could leave his daughter. I guess this is a good question to begin with. I want so much to believe you. I love you, but that's something you always knew. Please help me figure out where we go from here. I need you to make sense of this place. I don't belong here.